So I'm Jane Lees. I'm a Church of England vicar in Oxford, in a small community-based church. I'm also a part-time chaplain at a Methodist-run care home, and I've been there for a year now. I'm also an artist, and I use my art in both contexts, where I work and also in my personal life, which I'm really grateful to be able to do. I don't really see a separation between my spiritual life and my artistic practice. I think they flow together, and I see it in a very holistic way. The art weaves in and out of the events that happen to me, the people I meet, the things that happen at church and at the care home and elsewhere. So what happens in my life is often reflected in what I end up painting. A photo or an event will catch my imagination, and I usually know immediately that it needs to somehow be expressed on canvas. It kind of grips me, and I want to express it. There's that desire to see it come into fruition in art. So here's a photo of me in my studio. As you see, it's not really a studio. It's actually just an area in my house by the kitchen, kind of in the hub of the home. It's got a skylight above it, so it's a good place for light to paint and to draw. So that's where I mainly focus my art and where I paint. I work quite fast. I take an average about probably 6 to 8 hours on a painting, depending on the size and complexity in it. I work in acrylics, as I like the flexibility of this medium and how you can layer up the colours and the texture, and it just is easy to clean up afterwards, so that's another reason I stick with acrylics. So that's what I really enjoy. And I'm going to talk in this kind of talk about my art, really about landmarks that have helped me shape my artistic practice. I always loved art from when I was young. My parents were both artists. My dad was quite a cartoonist, and my mum was a watercolourist. I always loved art. I did art at school. I did art A-level, but I've never had any formal training at art school or anything like that. When I was raising my young family, I didn't really do any art for quite a long time. And I would say it was probably 2010 before I picked up a paintbrush with any serious intent. So this portrait here is a self-portrait that I did in actually 2008. And it came out of something we were doing at church with young people, where we were getting them to depict themselves, to do their own self-portraits. And I just decided I'd do one myself as well. And I think that kind of sparked something in me when I did this portrait, that I actually wanted to do more and to go deeper in that, which is what I ended up doing. So I would say this was really the start of my renewed interest in painting again. So I think the next thing that was a catalyst for me, particularly developing my interest in portraiture, was a group that I joined online. I'm going to talk mainly about my portrait art, although I do love doing landscapes as well. I joined a group called Julia Kay's Portrait Party on Flickr. And I think actually Tim himself was a member of this group at one point as well, as was another member of my church, Martin Beek, who is a prolific artist. You can find lots of his art on Flickr if you have a look. And this group was started by an American woman called Julia Kay. And she had, for the 3 years, every day, just painted her own self-portrait. And then she decided she'd like to found a group where people uploaded photos of themselves and got other artists to depict them. So this group started off quite small, but it snowballed, and now there's over 1,000 members to the group. But I was there in the group from 2010, and I would say that it was drawing and painting people from this group that really developed my interest in portraiture and helped me to develop technique and insight into how to make someone's portrait. Let's go to the next one. So these are portraits that I did from photos uploaded to Julia Kay's Portrait Party. They're strangers that I haven't met apart from through this group. But as we painted and drew each other, it was amazing how a sense of community started to emerge. And somehow through painting a stranger's face, you realise that you can begin to empathise with them, and you can see things perhaps from their perspective, even if you don't know them very well. I began to find sometimes I could intuitively sense things about this person through painting them. It's a kind of meditative approach to painting someone's face. I'll show you another of their pictures. There's another one from Julia Kay's Portrait Party, the kind of whispering cherub in the corner that was a part of the background of the photograph. So this group became a natural way of sharing and developing community by commenting on one another's portraits and just learning to celebrate art together. And soon we were friends and a community, and that still happens today, that we're very close to various people in this group. And the group started to have meetups around the world. And one of the places it met up was in our church at St. Luke's a couple of times, maybe 3 times actually, in the early 2010 onwards. So this is a picture of us, some members of Julia Kay Portraits Party in St. Luke's Church, just doing each other portraits. And we had a wonderful day that day. The church, you see, is the old building of St. Luke's. We actually rebuilt this church to make it more modern, but we kept the shell of the building. So the looks are kind of like quite colourful and old, but you'll see a picture of the new building a bit later in the presentation. Just show you another one from this particular gathering with Julia Kay's portrait party. We're all holding up each other's portraits of each other here. It was just a wonderful day of actually meeting people that we'd been in contact so much with online already. So I think the next thing that happened is this, and you'll probably recognise one person, or at least one person in this group, Tim on the right-hand side there. Tim Lowley knew a member of our church who I've mentioned already, Martin Beek, who is an artist, and had met him online through Flickr. Tim had also been a member of Julia Kay's portrait party for a little bit, and Tim got in touch with our church. He found out about it online and asked if he could come to Oxford and bring a group of art students from his university for a week to St. Luke's to do an art project with us. Because we're a very creative church in many ways, we immediately said yes, and we were delighted that they were able to come. And this project chimed with me for many reasons, which I'll go into in a minute. But first of all, just to explain a bit about what it was. This painting you see displayed here is called the Oxford Tema, and I don't know if Tim's mentioned this to you before, but he brought this painting over, which was in pieces, wooden pieces, like a jigsaw, and each piece of wood was made of a different kind of wood. And the intention was he brought it over and we assembled it together and we helped to finish it. So all the art students and members of the church were involved in painting little dots on the painting to complete this beautiful painting of Tema. So it became something that we participated in, and we were in a community around this painting, which was wonderful in itself. And then at the end of the week, we had a big procession down from our sister church to St. Luke's, where we displayed the portrait and had a wonderful service together at the end of the week. And it now hangs in our church and is a reminder to us of that wonderful time and that week. So this whole project chimed with me for a lot of reasons. The first one was, if I go to the next slide. While then Tim and his students were with us during the week, they joined in all the activities that we'd normally do at the church. And one of those was our youth group, which is quite a kind of wild, sometimes unruly group of young people from quite varying backgrounds, some with quite a lot to face in their lives, social disadvantage and all sorts of things. And Tim suggested that they should make a tableau of this icon by just dressing up and making a tableau with all props that we could find around, like cardboard and all sorts of bits and pieces. So this is an icon of St. Luke the Evangelist painting the Madonna, and you can see the angels just leaning over the shoulder of Luke and inspiring him to paint this icon, and there stands the Madonna on the right. So this is the young people's what they came up with from this. I hope you can see that all right. But they managed to get together a wonderful depiction of the icon through dressing up and taking part. And this whole idea about creating a tableau from an ancient icon really inspired me and made me think about iconography and how it could be included in my art. And I really loved the idea that these rather chaotic young people were suddenly represented as saints in an iconic picture. And that really chimed with what I believe about St. Luke's, that people are valuable, and they are people who are on the margins should be brought into the centre of God's love. And I thought about St. Luke, who is the patron saint of artists. I don't know if you know that, but our church is called St. Luke's, and it's the patron saint of artists, which is really appropriate for us because we do love art at St. Luke's. St. Luke is also a doctor, and he wrote a gospel where he welcomed people who are on the edges of society. And St. Luke seems to have that outreach to people who are disadvantaged or who don't have a voice, or perhaps who other people ignore. So it made me want to paint a painting that somehow was a modern version of this icon. So what I ended up with was this here, which I also have behind me. You can see a bit of it. So in this depiction of the icon, Tim takes the place of St. Luke the evangelist. He's painting his daughter Tema here as the central part of the painting, and that has significance in a way, because you think of the Madonna being like the bearer of Christ, and somehow I do believe that in Tema we see Christ, and I really do see Christ's presence in her, and how she brings community around her. And although she can't do anything for herself, she shows so much of God's love. And then behind Tim is Rochelle, who's a member of the youth club, and she's kind of guiding Tim's hand. She's being the angel figure in jeans behind Tim, guiding his hand to help paint the portrait. And to the right is a single mum and her new baby that were coming along to church. I wanted to somehow challenge some of the stereotypes of what is a saint, and to think about how people are depicted in art, people who we might not think to value and to put in the centre. I had another picture that I did along these lines about challenging stereotypes, I suppose. This was a little bit earlier in my painting life. You probably recognise the two cherubs from the Raphael painting. And I depicted them as two children that at that time came to our church at St. Luke's. Trinity is the one on the left, and Mercedes, the little one on the right. They're two young children, and they both came from quite vulnerable and difficult family backgrounds. And I wanted to somehow say through the painting that they were precious and they were important in God's sight. So I wanted to paint this painting to try and show that somehow. And I'm carrying on with the theme of iconography. I did do a depiction of this one of my favourite icons, which is this Rublef painting of the Trinity. You see the three figures of the Trinity, and I've sort of tried to depict it in my own way to the right. I was interested in the way Rublef painted a sort of circular picture. If you look at, you can draw a circle around those three figures, and it kind of represents the three figures of the Godhead, and they're all in kind of perfect community with each other, but they're also inviting the viewer into communion with them as well. And I wanted to depict that in my painting, because that's quite foundational to what St. Luke's is about too, inviting people into community and into God's presence through that. So that was one of the ways that Tim's visit with his students really inspired me to think about iconography in quite a surprising kind of a way, really. And that's something that I've really stayed with me since then. And another way Tim's visit inspired me, this could be quite a lot of things flowing from inspiration from Tim, which is I've realised since I was doing this talk. So one of the things was Tema herself, and after I had the privilege of going to visit them on my sabbatical in 2015, I met Tema and saw how she was really at the centre of the lowly home, and how everything revolved around her, rather than being shut away like you might sometimes think somebody who's severely disabled might be. She wasn't. She was right there, and community was around her. She was the heart of everything, just as she's the heart of most of Tim's artworks as well. So I made a couple of paintings, one for Sherry with Tema, and the other for her carer Ellen, who lives with them and takes care of Tema too. And this is another reason that Tim's visit chimed with me so much when he came over to England and to Oxford to do the Oxford Tema with us. And that's because I also had a disabled sister called Morag. She was profoundly disabled, not so much as Tema, because she could kind of grunt and she could finger feed, but she couldn't do much else really. But she was the most amazing, joy-giving person in some ways that I've ever met. And you could never leave Morag's presence without feeling better, because she was always there to give you a hug and to accept you. And there was something that she showed me about God that without words that I'll never forget. She died in March 2019, and I did want to make a bit of art about her, so I painted her portrait, which I took down to her Leicestershire home where they'd looked after her so well, and presented it to her carer, who'd been her key worker, who now keeps that. And also at the time we were doing other workshops at St Luke's, and we were doing a mask making workshop. And so I made a kind of mask of Morag's face, kind of depicting her as a saint in a way, because I do believe that when she died, she was made whole, and that I will see her one day and know that she is whole. I suppose you could almost look at this and think it's a bit like almost like making a death mask or something. And in that way, it kind of helped me grieve, because it was quite soon after her death when I made this mask. Just making it helped me to process her death in some ways. She died of ovarian cancer, but it hadn't been detected, because often with severely disabled people, they can't tell you what's wrong. And although the carers knew something was wrong, it wasn't until she had the right kind of scans and treatment that they saw the cancer, and by that time it was too late. So I was talking about workshops at St Luke's, and the other thing I think that sprang from Tim and the students' visit to St Luke's is that we started doing a lot of workshops for the community and the church. And we had a series of about probably 10 workshops from 2015 onwards in the church. We provided these for free because we really didn't want people to feel they couldn't come. We wanted it to be accessible to all ages and all kind of backgrounds, although it was for adults, these particular workshops. So here we've got a picture of an artist called Daniel Balalescu at the back of the photo, and he's doing a painting workshop with everybody. And you can see the Oxford Tema in the background behind him, hanging on our wall. We did other workshops, like some had a more kind of gently Christian base, like we had a potter who came along and helped us make a font, a new font for the church. We were involved in helping design the lid. We had a mosaic workshop where we made a mosaic together that now hangs in the church as well. And other workshops, for instance, this one, which I'll explain to you a little bit about. This is called Lost Property. And in this workshop, you had to bring along an item that was important to you, any item, and explain the story with the group, and then make art in some way from it. So just to explain, this object is a suitcase. It's quite an ordinary suitcase, or it was. It belonged to my parents. It's kind of, you can see it's a 70s sort of style suitcase. It's got an avocado cover, which you often saw in the 70s. You might not be old enough to know that, but and there were a whole pile of my dad's letters. He was a missionary doctor in Africa, and I was there at the beginning of my life until I was 2 years old. And I just began to read his letters home, which he used to write home every fortnight. And I began to realise a lot of stuff I hadn't realised, how hard life was out there for a missionary doctor. There wasn't the right equipment often, the terrible things would happen. He didn't have an easy time, but it was a real journey of exploration for me to read the letters. So I wanted to express this somehow in this suitcase. It seemed a suitcase would symbolise the travel from Africa to England. So I ended up doing a portrait of my dad. Here's my dad on the front, and some bits of the letters I've actually taken out and, well, photocopied and appliqued onto the background with some quotes about, some about me and some about my brother, important things to me. Sorry. Next one. And this, on the other side was my mum. I put my mum on the back. And the painting behind her is actually a painting she did of her time in Africa. She was a lovely watercolour artist, and I kind of photocopied and managed to paste this painting of Africa in the background of my mother. Then in 2015, I was already mentioned I went on sabbatical, and I went to see Tim and Sherry and Tema in Chicago. But before that, I went to a place called Taizé. And I don't know if anyone's ever been to Taizé or heard of it, but it's a place in France where a group of brothers are committed to a life together of worship in a very specific way with beautiful chants they sing, but they also do an immense amount of work with social justice around the world. And the founder was somebody called Brother Roger. And when I went, it was the 10-year anniversary of his death. So I really wanted to somehow honour him. I really admired his work and his care for the poor and the marginalised. So I painted this particular painting of him on a visit to some part of the world where he was just showing love to a beggar, which I found a very moving picture. Another instance in St. Luke's that I felt I wanted to depict in a portrait form was the confirmation of some of our young people in 2017 at St. Luke's, and the bishop came along, which is quite a big thing for us because we're quite a small church. Some of the young people that got confirmed were the same ones that were in that tableau that I showed you earlier in the show. It was a very moving moment. I wanted to capture something of God's presence somehow through the painting. Again, you see the Oxford Emma depicted in the background, as she often is the background to many of the things that happened at St. Luke's. So in 2019, I started work at a care home as a chaplain, as I mentioned at the beginning. And I was just so thrilled that I was also able to use my art in that context. And it began by me simply painting some of the residents. I felt somehow painting them would kind of added value and help them to realise how much they are valued and beautiful as well, to see that their faces hanging in their rooms and to realise that somebody had taken that care to paint them. And then it kind of snowballed because the care assistants and the people who work at the home saw the paintings and asked if they could have a portrait too. So I began to paint some of the care assistants and the nursing staff, and that's still carrying on, which is a wonderful way really to be able to offer something to the home. So this is a portrait of Wayne, who's a care assistant at the home. Then I started painting grandchildren of care assistants, and so this is a portrait of some of their one person's grandchildren. But also I began to do workshops with some of the older people in the home on a regular basis, and that's what I'm still doing. This is the first show of a few of the older people in the home who've been doing still life. So every week I'd get them to paint something different, like some fruit or a cake or something very simple. And this was the result of their work, which we actually did a little private view and let them have some sort of like an opening ceremony, and we had some hymns and canapes at the end. They've also started a series of self-portraits too. So they've taken a couple of mirrors into the home and they've been painting their self-portraits. It was actually quite moving because these portraits somehow do express something about them that they wouldn't have been able to say in words. And I'd like to see more of them do self-portrait. I think it's a wonderful thing, an affirming thing to do. Here's a couple of the people who are doing their self-portraits, so you can see. And also the work I've been doing has spilled over into actually doing murals on the dementia level. So I've been opening out the corridors, which can be quite long and bleak looking, with some seaside scenes on the walls. There's one of the residents in front of another seaside scene. And just to end with, when I started at, well, not long after I started at the care home, that everything went into lockdown, but I continued to go along to the care home to work, which I was quite grateful for, actually, to be able to go and work face to face with people. But of course, the lockdown time was a really challenging time at the beginning. And sort of towards the beginning in April, I came across this picture that a nurse had taken, a kind of selfie at the end of her shift, and just an exhausted, tearful selfie. And just seeing this photograph really gripped me, and I thought, I have to paint this. Sometimes I see that when I see a photograph, I have to sit down and paint it. And it was Good Friday, and I painted the portrait all in one day. It kind of reminded me of the painting on the right. I'm just trying to remember the painter, so I put it written down somewhere. It's part of a bigger painting of the Deposition of Christ, and it's by Roger van der Weyden. And this is Mary Cleopas in the background, and you can just see she's crying. She's been crying for hours and hours. It's that kind of sense of exhausted weeping from grief that made me want to capture her face. I also did another painting of a friend of mine, Rita, who for a while was going into a COVID ward, to just sit with the people who were patients there because they couldn't have any visitors at the time. So she was taking the place of families, trying to provide support for people who are often desperately sick. So I just wanted to pick her as well. So really that's the conclusion. That's what I didn't want to end on a bit of a sad note, but that's how this does end. And we do continue to be in a challenging time with COVID, but it's good if we can think of ways to express that through art as well, I think. But thank you for listening.
Thank you, Katie. That was really fantastic.
This presentation will go through the time of my development, show the art at the time. So it begins when I started to make art, but this is a very recent painting, about 2 or 3 years old. The idea is to refer to a painting of Caspar David Friedrich, which is called The Monk at the Sea. So it's actually a self-portrait, and it shows the back of myself standing at a sort of parking lot and looking into the distance, into the horizon. So I started to paint when I was about 20 or 21 years old. I went to Munich and I saw an exhibition. It was an exhibition of American painting from 1930 to 1980. And it was a very good exhibition, and it really influenced me a lot. I can still remember some of the paintings. One large painting from Barnett Newman, and there was also the paintings from the photorealists like Richard Estes, and that fascinated me a lot. And then I started to paint. In that time, I was working for an insurance company, so I started to paint just as a hobby, after work. And I made a lot of progress, and then I decided to quit my work and started to become a painter. At the beginning, I was interested in the existentialistic literature like Sartre and Camus and writers like that, and I worked with some others, and we had a name for our painting, and we named it existentialistic painting, between being and nothingness. So the life was just open, and we didn't know where our life would go. So this was the reason for this name, And then I had a large studio with some friends, and we were just experimenting with all kinds of art, and we made a large installation which we called World Lights Up. It shows a chaotic world, chaotic painting, and this was a little bit like our lives were at that time. The life was chaotic, and this was the expression of our being, Okay, this was another installation at that time. This was in 1989 or 1990. And this was, we were experimenting with video, with painting, and with all kinds of stuff. It was a collaborative project with a friend of me. We had a large studio, and so this was all in our studio. It was an old farmhouse. I made very large paintings at that time. That was 4 paintings, like 2 to 3 meters size, and called sea pieces. Another painting of that time, it shows burned books. The burned books were mounted on the canvas, and it was combined with oil color and also very large in size. All the paintings are lost, so I moved out in 1991, and I couldn't take the paintings to another place. So everything was destroyed at that time. Yeah. Also this one. This was inspired by, they found a lot of dead seals at the sea in Germany, and I made this painting called The Dead Souls. Although this painting is lost. So in 1992, I started to join the Academy of Fine Arts. And those are paintings from this time, which are showing the way from the very large paintings, expressive paintings, to smaller paintings that I started in the academy, just to show the progress. It's kind of a break now, you see it, in the way I paint and in the expression of the paintings. This is painted after the academy. At the Academy of Fine Arts, I started a series of paintings, and I named the series As Things Are. The paintings were all the same size and all in black and white. I only used black color and white color and canvas. So, and everything is painted with brushes. And for my diploma, I made 100 paintings, and I painted at that time 1 painting a day. This was inspired by conceptual art. You might know the painter Onkawara. Onkawara is a conceptual artist who paints a picture with a date on it. And the paintings look like a black background, and then with white color, 5th May 1975 or anything like that, you know. And just the name of the date on it. And he's putting everything what happened on that day in the back of the painting, like cutouts from newspapers or magazines or things like that. And at that time, I used a different approach for the same concept, you know. So I painted like a painting which shows a cutout from a newspaper photo or magazine photo or book photo. And I've done that for a while, and it ended up like making my own subjects and my own photographs and making paintings after things I found outside somewhere, on travels, on the way to the academy or anywhere, you know. And every subject was good enough for me, even like this one, like a trash bin was good enough for me to paint. There's a little story about when I studied theology much later. I made another painting of 3 round trash pins, and a colleague of me, he was interested what I paint, and he saw that I painted trash pins, and he criticized me for that. He couldn't believe what I'm doing, and from that on, everybody called me the trash pin painter. So this was my title at the seminary. I have another story. When I finished my my work at the insurance company, I wanted to become a painter. My parents were mad. They said, "How can you give up your job and your profession, and what are you doing?" and all that stuff, And well, I had saved some money, but the money lasted about 2 or 3 years, and at the end, I had to earn some money, And one time, I found myself working on a construction site, and I had to clean up the construction site, and I had to put out everything in a trash bin. So that was my work for a couple of weeks, and I said, well, I laughed about it, and I said, now you are at the lowest point. From now on, it can only go up. This is a painting which shows a couple of things: a glass of water, it shows a book, and it shows a bottle of water. And it's a table, and the light is upon everything. It has to do with my life. It has to do that I started to read in that book, which is a Bible, of course, and it has to do with my way of working, to be very, very sober and very clear in what I'm doing and what I'm thinking. And the light from above should enlighten everything, This painting has a spiritual background, but it's just what you see, Painting is about what you see. And so to me, it's both. It's what you see and also some thoughts behind. Another black and white painting from that series. It shows a building with windows, and you can look through the building. It's like a dead house or something, I'm always interested in ruins, in things that are not finished, or things that have seen better times and had died in some way. That's always an interesting subject to paint for me. It's just an ordinary street scene, and I passed by and I found that little teddy bear which was leaning against that lamp post. So I just made a photograph of it and made a painting of it, It has like a certain melancholy in it. Another black and white painting. Some black and white paintings show persons, but very few. It shows a passage somewhere on an airport. I like paintings that are not something obvious to see, you know. There's a story behind it, but you don't know what the story is telling. So you have to think about it. You have to combine that with your own thoughts and with your own stories and with your own life. A painting must have something mysterious, you know. So a lot of my paintings show like abandoned scenes where you can see nobody, just empty spaces. So this is actually the show in North Park University, a photograph of it. I think it was in 2002. And I showed 102 of this black and white. Some are monochromatic, colored, like in red or in blue or in green. And I showed 102 paintings on three places, 3 exhibitions in America. One was in North Park, the other in Columbus, Georgia, and the third one at Messiah College in Pennsylvania. I always show the black and white paintings in a large amount, and so it's really a mix of everything in it. And this is my intention, to show that mix of different things, of people and landscape and buildings and places, also some still lifes. So there's everything in it. This is another exhibition here in Germany. It shows the way I'm exhibiting the series called As Things Are. The students and the people are always interested in my technique, and there was one of the questions, how I start and how I work. So I made once photographs of the different layers. So this shows the first layer, and you can see it's just dark and light and very, very raw. So, and I'm showing the different layers of the painting now. So this is the next, and you can see how it develops. So I'm going over the whole painting in one sitting. So a sitting is about 2 hours, and then I let it dry. So it's acrylic acrylic paint, and then I start with the next layer. Sometimes you see very few difference between. And at one point, I just decide that I should stop now. Sometimes it's not really finished, to my opinion, but I just stop, and that it's enough. So I think that is the last. Okay. In the year 2003, I had a student visiting me from Toronto, Canada. So he was studying art in Toronto and master study, and they one part of the study was to visit an artist somewhere, and he decided to come over to Germany to me and stayed 4 weeks with me and working with me together. And when he came, I said, well, we worked on some black and white paintings, and I let him paint as well in my paintings. And then I said, I always wanted to start with the color work. And let's do that together. So I started with him a large color painting. This is about 1 meter to 1 meter 50. And so he wasn't there when I finished it, but he helped me to paint it. And I let him paint on this painting. And it developed really good. I was very satisfied with the result. So I decided to make further color paintings from that point. And that is painted in oil, not in acrylic. Another color painting, and you see another figure with a bag. It's not me this time, but it's like the same, somebody looking into the ocean, into the heaven, into the sea, and everything is open, and looking at the sea is a form of meditation. Painting is a form of meditation, and heaven and sea is something that stands for eternity. Yeah, it stands for our future life in heaven, you know. So to me, it's a very spiritual painting. In 2009. Yeah. Well, I have to tell something. When I started with art was something holy for me. Galleries and museums, to me, they were kind of holy places. And art and to paint, which I thought I'm not able to do it when I started, was something from God, you know, an ability that came from God. And well, I figured out that I could paint actually. And when I stayed at the Academy of Fine Arts, I found out that art wasn't holy like I thought, you know, and the artists were no holy persons. Actually, most of them were very egoistic and interested only in themselves. And art making is sometimes something egocentric. And so I appreciate very much what Jane does, making let people have part on painting and making workshops and bring people together and a community together. Actually, in art, there's a great competition between the artists. Everybody wants to have success and everybody thinks that he is the best, you know. That was always difficult for me to accept. When I finished at the academy, I was starting to work in the parish, in the parish community, and that was very good for me. I enjoyed that very much because I was there for others, and I was doing something for others. When you make art, you do it only for yourself, and you are always in the center. You are in the center when you make an exhibition. Everything is around you, and yeah, working for a community is different. Working for a parish is different. Working for God is different. And I found out that that was very good to do. And I did a lot of work in the parish and in the community. There was always a question to me, becoming ordained, becoming a priest. I have a very old friend who is a priest in America, and when I stayed for the exhibition in America, I met him again, and we spent a couple of days together. And on that time, actually, we talked a lot, and he said, have you ever thought about going in a seminary and becoming a priest? And I said, well, I'm not the person to do that. I cannot do that. I'm not ready for that, you know. And so the years later, a lot of things happened to me, and there were a lot of questioning about going that way and becoming a priest. So I finally tried to study theology. It's a long story, and it will take too much time to tell everything around it, you know. Just I decided about 8 or 9 years later, really to take the step forward and to begin with studying theology. And it takes a long time to do that, and it's a long way to go, and you have to look a lot into the space and do a lot of thinking about if this is the right decision or not. But I made this decision at about 2009, and this shows a painting which is called, well, I have only the German title, I cannot translate it really. Lauf der Dinge, der Lauf der Dinge. It's a phrase, you know. This shows my studio. I have a studio. I work as a priest here in a parish in Kamphausen in Germany, and this is my old studio where I lived. That is about half an hour away. I still have it, and I still work in it. When I'm staying here in my apartment, I work on a table in my sleeping room. I have a table like you see on the photo, and an easel, and I work everywhere. When I studied theology, I've been in a seminary, and after 1 week staying in the seminary, I brought a table and my painting stuff and everything, and so I'm just not able to finish painting. I'm addicted to paint. I cannot stop. That's a color work I like very much. I don't know if the people like it, but people, when I'm going out and to look about subjects to paint, I start early in the morning and I sit in my car, I jump in my car and I drive somewhere, and I drive and drive and drive. And on some places in the middle of nowhere, I'm finding something that interests me. And that could be a scene like that, you know. It's a bad weather, it's raining, it's a river, and it's like these things around it.
How big is this one?
I painted 2 times, one 30 to 40 centimeters and one about 50 to 60 to 80 centimeters. I don't know how.
This is a fantastic painting.
Yeah, I like it very much. Maybe you understand it, Tim.
Yeah.
I cannot really say what's about it, you know. So it's mysterious. It's a scene. It shows different things, and like it starts a story in the mind, you know. That's what I'm trying. That someone looks upon it and the story is beginning. But the story is not told, it's open. Yeah. And I'm very much, I like very much movies from the Russian director Andrei Tarkovsky.
He's the best.
I don't know if you have seen movies from him.
Yeah.
And he always shows like scenes like that, you know. It could be a scene from one of his films. Yeah. He's always showing water and rain and there's one movie called what's it called? The Stalker.
Stalker.
The Stalker, and the Stalker goes into the zone. It's called the zone. Yeah. As a zone is like a special area, like an area 51, you know. And so this is like area 51, like a zone where something could happen, and it could be dangerous to go in it. Yeah, one question was about spirituality and art. It's a very large painting, and it's one of my favorite paintings. And it shows a building with windows and a sea in the background. It's not a real scene. It's a combined scene with which has a foreground and a background. I put that both together, foreground and background. There's the idea that we are humans and we are limited. We look into the eternity, into the nothingness, in God's presence. But we cannot go over. We are on this side. We are on this side of the life, and we cannot look. We cannot go in the. I cannot find the right word, but you might know what I mean. There's this side and the other side. The other side is the side where the eternity is, where God lives and everything. And so we just have to look in at the sea. It's like look at the eternity, or in the eternity. And there's something coming from God to us. And what is coming from God to us is the light. And you see the light coming into our life, so into our side from the other side. Yeah. And so this is a spiritual thing about this painting. And what is coming from the eternity to this world is a light, and the light is also a sign for Jesus Christ. So this is the story about it, And it's actually the building of that, which I used for this painting, is the building of the Tel Aviv airport, the airport from Israel. And the sea is not the sea, it's the lake Gennesaret, the lake where Jesus traveled upon, And I've been in the Holy Land in that year, and I made photographs from the Sea of Gennesaret and of the airport building of Tel Aviv, and I combined that to this painting. There's also a black and white version, and you see the difference. You see, sometimes it's completely different from the color painting. And this is actually very small. Yeah, another way of making my painting is using different backgrounds and different foregrounds. You see the people here are not looking at the sea, they're looking into a landscape. Okay, another monogrammatic painting. I made a color version. This is a color version of the same scene, the same subject, and you see it's different from it. I have here it's inside a building, and when I made the color painting, I thought, well, I just let it open. I opened the space, I opened the building, so it came out very different. So there was a question about the beauty of the mundane. So yes, that's kind of mundane, but yeah, there's a very painting, very good painting that I like from a painter named Arnold Böcklin. There's in the Stuttgart Museum of Art, there's a painting called Villa at the Sea. I often try to take a subject of the art history and make a modern version, an own version of it. So the painting shows architecture and plantation, like trees and palm trees. And so I found this scene somewhere in Spain and made a painting of it. It also has to do, I always thought when I was young, I want to have a white house at the sea. Well, I probably will never have one. You think of a promised land or something, you know, when you are young, something you want to reach, or you have your fantasies about it, and so I'm still fascinated of houses at the sea, and I painted a couple of pieces, and I'm thinking as well as the paintings of Edward Hopper, who had this subject, house at the sea, and I like those paintings a lot, and it's just doing my own version of something, you know, of the art history. It's not really the mundane which is interesting me. It's a subject, but the subject is as good as a trash bin. So a trash bin could be as beautiful as a villa. Yeah, 2017, I've been ordained as a Catholic priest. Was a long way to go for me. Well, but I'm actually very happy that I did it. I always worked beside painting, and that's I think that's very normal that painters have to work something else. So a lot of my colleagues are taxi drivers and working in restaurants or things like that, you know. And I always thought it's better to work for God and to show the people the way to God. I was working in a long time in a museum, and part of it was working at the information desk. And we had a new director of the museum. He changed everything, and the result was that the people couldn't find the way to the restrooms. And they were coming to me and were asking for the restrooms. So this happened about 30 or 40 times during the day, and I was just tired of it. And so I decided, or I was thinking, it's better to show the people the way to God than to show the way to the restroom. That was the reason I became a priest.
You should write to the director of the museum.
Yeah. That's the truth behind everything. 2018, I've been to America, and I made a dream coming true. I went to the West Coast and drove from Vancouver to San Diego. And I'm actually very glad that I did that, because, well, it wouldn't be possible at the moment, and you don't know. And the situation in America, we are very concerned about it, about everything that happened in your country. But you have, in America, is just a great country from his natural monuments and everything, you know. And that's a scene from that travel in Washington, state of Washington, at the coast of the Olympic Peninsula, which was very beautiful. And yeah, it's a beautiful country. And it's also refers to a painting of Caspar David Friedrich. There are a lot of paintings of him which show a tree in the middle of an image. It's also interesting because there are another trash pins and things like that on the painting. I've done a couple of sea pieces recently. That's one of those paintings, a larger size, and it shows a man walking or bathing. It's just open what it means, you know. Could mean something, or it could be just a bath. It could have to do with baptism, you know. It could have to do with cleaning. It could have to do like going to the water forever. So it's open to everything, you know. I have a place in the South Spain, and when I'm in the South Spain at the coast, I have a ritual. So I'm going into the sea and washing everything from my body away, of everything from the whole year, every dirt and everything which is upon the soul and upon the mind, and just wash it away in the cold water. Yeah, this is a scene. It's a service. It shows me and a colleague, and it shows a painting of me. And the painting is called Joseph, and the church is a church of the Holy Family, and they have they've asked me to make a painting of Joseph, and I thought about it and didn't know if I can make such a painting. And I was really thinking a lot of time, a couple of months, how to realize such a painting. And so I decided if I should paint Joseph, I can't paint Joseph alone. So Joseph is to me Joseph because of his family. So I made this painting. I wanted to make a scene from our life and from our time, and not from the time in the past. To me, it was very clear that I probably should choose figures from refugees, because for me, the Holy Family, they are like refugees, you know. They had to leave, they had to go in a foreign country, and though this is the actually problem of our world. So I looked upon hundreds and hundreds of photographs of refugees, if I can find a Joseph, and I couldn't find one. But I found a Mary and a child. The Joseph I found finally in a friend of mine who lived in Italy, in South Italy. And I made a visit to him, And I said, well, I can paint you. I need to have a connection to the people I paint. Well, it's very difficult to paint somebody after a photograph if you don't know the one. So I decided to took him for the Joseph, and I made this portrait in a rural scene in Italy. It shows a way going to the sea. All the ways in my paintings go to the sea, and so I painted the sea in the back, and I combined that with a photograph of a woman with a little child, and I gave the woman the blue color of Mary, so a dress with a blue color, and the only thing what I changed for Joseph is the kippah on the head, which shows that he's a Jew. And so I made this painting, and Joseph is in the middle of the painting. Mary is looking like concerned and looking somewhere in another direction, and Jesus, the child, he's actually satisfied with himself, and yeah, he's not really looking at somebody. Yeah, so I made this painting and I gave it to them in this service, and it's actually hanging inside the church. They are very happy with it, and that's my first painting I did for a church. And yeah, this is the end.
The end is upon us.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Jane, are you there? It's interesting to me because it, in some ways, circles back to what Jane has been doing. I like that sort of connection there.
Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of time, but let's talk a little bit. I'm not sure where to go. There's a lot there, and you know, to me, it's really interesting to see how the two of you have integrated the work of being a pastor or a priest with being an artist. Jane, I didn't expect you to sort of caught me off guard with the visit. But you know, it's interesting because I think having been married to a pastor for many years, the life of the church is a lot bigger than for a pastor. It's a lot bigger than a lot of people realize, that there are a lot of connections and yeah. So I appreciate both of you talking about that part of your life, and
I think it made, from my point of view, it made me realize how much your visit had influenced my art, actually. Just going through different landmarks in my life, and what I mentioned about the iconography and the links with Tema and what painting her has meant to you, and thinking about my own sister as well. So I think more than I realised what an influence it had on me, you coming. So.
Well, those kinds of things, and I think they're really important. They're mutually influential. I would not have made the Oxford Tema without the invitation to come to St. Luke's, and it, yeah, I think there's something about the life in general, but I think this is true probably as much or more for pastors and priests than it is for most people. That is, you don't just have yourself in mind, you have a community. You're attending to a community, and the life of that community will inevitably have meaning for your work as an artist as well in some fashion, and vice versa. And it's really interesting to me. I was really interested also about the trip you have a house in southern Spain, did you say?
I don't have one. I would like to have one.
I thought you said southern Spain was like, wow. But that ritual you talked about walking into the sea was a really interesting.
Well, I'm often going there. I had an uncle living in that area, you know, in southern Spain, but he has died some couple of years ago. So, but he had a house in Spain. So I took a lot of holidays going there. You know.
I was really interested in seeing that early work. I had not seen the early work you made. It reminded me a lot of Kiefer, Anselm Kiefer.
Yeah, I was influenced of Anselm Kiefer at that time.
And it's interesting to me to see, you know, it feels like you moved more towards Richter or Ankara, a combination of Ankara and Richter. But I am kind of curious about, it seemed to me, I think part of what attracted me to your work from the start was it felt like it had a very meditative quality about it. At what point did that sort of, I don't know if you want to talk about it in terms of spirituality, but at what point did that sort of like become a driving factor? Was that in school, when you were in school?
Yeah, that changed a lot, of course, you know. Well, I mean, you always decide alone how to paint and what you paint, you know. Nobody can teach that, you know. But I went to academy to have time to develop something, you know. If before I had no time, you always have to earn some money and to get your things together to live, you know. And on the academy, I had time to develop something, and so it developed. And you always have to defend your work when you're studying art, you know. You have to defend it against your teachers and against your colleagues, and I think that helps a lot. And you get professional, yeah. That changes a lot, you know. And you have this. You always look upon art, everything turns around it, you know, and you have all informations and I couldn't paint large paintings at the academy, so I had to get smaller. So I had only a small space, you know, in the studio. So I have to change my work. And yeah. Then when you're out of the academy, you are again alone with yourself, you know, and have to decide everything alone, what is good and what is bad. And that's why many stop to paint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of what's interesting to me about that is in comparing your two stories with Jane, it feels like being part of the community gave you, and then further work in terms of working in a home has really, to me, it's pretty amazing how that sort of expanded your practice and given you like a purpose to continue making art.
Yeah, I've been really grateful that I've been able to use my art as part of my ministry. I don't see it as a separation from my ministry at all, really. It weaves in and out, and it's a part of it. I wondered if you felt the same, Andreas, or do you feel that there's a sort of a slight separation between your art and your ministry at times? In the sense that you'd like to have more time to devote to art, but you have to attend to the needs of the parish, sort of thing.
Andreas, what do you think? Do you feel like you have enough time for art, or you wish you had more time?
Well, I wish I would have more time, but sometimes there's a lot of work to do, you know, but I'm taking my time to paint, so I don't let it go, you know, and you have to do that, and it's important for me, for my health, for my, yeah.
Sure.
And but I like my work as a priest very much, you know, and it's very important for me. And
it's interesting. I think it's probably similar to being a teacher. That is, I love being a professor.
yeah.
I wouldn't want to give up being an artist. So
Yeah.
we are fortunate. The three of us are fortunate in terms of having things that provide a kind of intensely practice, and yet at the same time connecting to a broader community. It's really.
And I like very much to do things for the community, you know, not only thinking about myself always, you know. So that, I think that's very important.
Sharing art with enabling other people to be artists who perhaps don't think they can be, because there's something innate in all of us that can be brought to life by starting to create something.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if you've thought about this, Andreas, the idea of how you can bring art into, like, working with parishioners. I think it's really interesting what Jane has done in terms of having workshops and sort of collaborating. That's something you think might be part of your ministry as well at some point?
Yeah. Well, I always want to bring my art inside the church in some way, to let the people see this side of me, and so I made exhibition at the seminary, and I always try to combine that and to not separate this from my life, you know. So this must go together, you know. Yeah, Jane said we are holistic, you know. Yeah.
All right, I guess we should probably end this meeting unless someone feels like there's something imperative to talk about. But again, thank you both, Andreas and Jane, for visiting with us today. And we should Zoom again some other time.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to me.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.